Jack Sullivan stood at the entrance of the shooting range. The faint hum of air conditioning and the sharp clang of gunshots in the distance filled the air. It was an ordinary day at the Bullseye Club, a place known for its elite shooters, both amateur and professional. The walls were lined with trophies, and the floor was littered with spent shells and dust. At 35, Jack wasn't exactly old, but life had taken its toll. His face, once youthful and bright, was now marked with the weight of his past years spent in the military, enduring the hardships of war, and coming back to a life that felt like a shadow of the one he'd left behind. The scars, both visible and invisible, were a part of him now. A part of his story that only a few people knew about. His daughter, Emma, was the only family he had. At 8 years old, she was his reason for everything. Despite his best efforts, Jack found himself drifting away from society, not because he didn't care, but because it was easier to shut himself off than to deal with the ghosts of his past. Jack had recently moved to the city and had joined the Bullseye Club hoping to find some sort of solace. He wasn't interested in fame. He wasn't trying to break records. He simply needed a place where he could be alone with his thoughts and drown out the noise of the world. And what better place to do that than at a shooting range? The solitude of it, the focus, the calm. As Jack made his way into the range, the members didn't notice him at first. That was fine with him. He wasn't looking for attention. But there were a few whispers, a few looks exchanged as he set up his gear. His attire, simple worn jeans and a faded jacket, was a stark contrast to the high-end gear most of the others were using. He was just another man in the corner, trying to find his way in the world. One person, however, couldn't take his eyes off him. James McClure, a rising star in the shooting community, watched Jack with an air of smugness. James, with his perfectly pressed shirt and expensive equipment, was everything Jack was not. He was young, talented, and most importantly, he had a record that had stood unchallenged for years. As Jack adjusted his stance and aimed at the target, James snickered under his breath. He'd seen men like Jack before. They came and went, their dreams of being great quickly dashed by the reality of competition. They weren't built for this, he thought. Jack took a deep breath, steadying his hand. He wasn't here to prove anything to anyone. He was here for the quiet. The first shot rang out, and the sound echoed through the range, cutting through the noise like a knife. Jack's focus never wavered. His posture was perfect, his grip tight but relaxed, the way he'd been taught in the military. He wasn't here to show off. He was here to escape. The target at the far end of the range had a neat hole right in the center, a perfect bullseye. The sound of the shot didn't even seem to register with Jack as he calmly checked the target, noting the precision of his shot. Around him, the room fell silent. The others had been busy with their own shooting. But now, all eyes were on Jack. James, who had been watching from the corner, raised an eyebrow. He didn't speak, but his smirk was enough. Just a fluke, he thought. Let's see if he can do it again. Jack set up for another shot, unfazed by the attention. He lifted his weapon and took aim, blocking out everything around him. The sound of his breathing was the only thing he could hear now. Another shot, another bullseye. The room was still. The tension in the air thickened. James could feel his pride bubbling up. He wasn't used to being outdone, especially by someone who didn't even belong in the same room. His jaw tightened, but he refused to show it. Instead, he walked over, slow and deliberate, his eyes never leaving Jack's. "You know," James said casually, "you might be lucky today, but it's going to take more than just a couple of decent shots to impress anyone here." His tone was condescending, dismissive. Jack didn't flinch. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just here to practice." James scoffed and turned to walk away, muttering under his breath, but he couldn't help glancing over his shoulder at Jack. He was good. Too good for someone who didn't look like they belonged. The range was closing for the day, and Jack was still shooting. His shots had been flawless, one after another. The group of onlookers, once disinterested, were now glued to his every move. Even the staff at the range, who had been tidying up in the back, had wandered over to witness this unexpected display of talent. James couldn't take it anymore. He approached the counter and spoke with the manager, a man named Dave, who was known for his strict rules about challenges. After a brief conversation, Dave turned to the crowd. "All right," Dave called out, his voice booming across the room. "We've got a challenge. Let's see if this newcomer can beat the record." James had been waiting for this moment. He was confident that there was no way Jack would be able to top his score, but the crowd was curious. Even Jack, for a moment, hesitated. The record was legendary. It was the kind of score that had stood for years, one that even the best of the best had struggled to break. But Jack had nothing to lose. He nodded, accepting the challenge. The room fell into a deep silence as Jack set up for the final shot. His hands were steady, his mind focused. He aimed, exhaled, and then bang. The shot rang out. But this time, the noise seemed different. It felt heavier, more significant. The target, which had been untouched for so long, now had a new hole. And not just any hole, a perfect shot that tore through the center of the target, making the previous record seem like nothing more than a distant memory. The room exploded with applause, the sound deafening as the crowd rushed to congratulate him. Even James stood there, his mouth agape, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Jack stood there, still and calm, as if nothing had changed. For him, this wasn't about proving anything. It was about the moment, one shot, one perfect moment of clarity. The rest of the world could keep its judgments and expectations. Jack Sullivan had just shown everyone that sometimes the quiet ones have the loudest impact. James stood in the middle of the room, the applause around him still ringing in his ears. He was caught off guard, staring at the target where his record had just been shattered. His pulse raced, and for the first time in years, his confidence was shaken. The crowd had gathered around Jack, patting him on the back, congratulating him on a shot that defied logic. It wasn't just a simple bullseye, it was perfect. But James wasn't done. He had built his reputation on this range, and he wasn't about to let some unknown veteran steal his spotlight. "That was impressive, old man," James said, forcing a smile, though his voice betrayed his irritation. He walked up to Jack, trying to mask his envy with arrogance. "But don't think you can just come in here and take my title without a fight." Jack turned to face James, his expression unreadable. He could sense the anger simmering just below the surface. Jack wasn't looking for drama, but James was clearly uncomfortable with the idea of being bested. "I didn't come here to take anything," Jack replied calmly. "I'm just here to shoot." James's smile faltered, and his competitive spirit flared up. He took a deep breath, puffing out his chest. "You think you've got what it takes to beat me at my own game? I've been shooting here for years. I don't lose. Ever." The challenge was clear. James wanted a rematch. A showdown, not just between Jack and himself, but between their pride and egos. The following Saturday, the Bullseye Club was buzzing with excitement. Word had spread about the surprising new contender who had broken James's record, and now a rematch was scheduled. The club had never seen anything like this, two people with such contrasting backgrounds, and yet both with something to prove. Jack arrived early, alone. Emma had stayed with a neighbor for the day, giving Jack the space he needed. The air felt different today, charged, as if the entire range was holding its breath. James was already there, stretching and preparing his equipment, as if he knew this was going to be the most important match of his life. The two men exchanged a quick glance when Jack walked in. No words were needed. The tension between them was palpable. The other members of the club gathered around, some taking bets, others simply watching with a mixture of awe and anticipation. "Ready to lose again, James?" Jack asked, his voice quiet, but carrying a subtle edge. He wasn't here to trash talk. He was here to shoot. James smirked, trying to regain his composure. "We'll see, old man." The first round began. James shot first, his movements sharp, quick, and confident. He hit the target. But it was a solid shot, no more, no less. He shot again, and again, his hits precise, but not extraordinary. It was the same as usual. Good, but nothing remarkable. Jack stepped up to the line, unbothered by the eyes on him. He loaded the rifle carefully, setting his stance with quiet precision. He took a deep breath, exhaled, and then banged the first shot. The target shattered in the middle, just like it had before. There was a gasp from the crowd. James's jaw clenched. This wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about pride. Jack hadn't just matched his earlier performance, he had improved on it. One more shot from Jack, and the crowd was beginning to cheer louder. The man who had been ignored was now the center of attention. James was feeling the heat, his perfect record slipping away. He glanced at Jack, trying to maintain his cool. But inside, the pressure was mounting. This wasn't supposed to happen. By the third round, James was beginning to panic. Jack had already outshot him in every attempt, and the pressure was mounting with each passing second. His shots were getting sloppier, less controlled. He was rushing through them, each one worse than the last. Jack, on the other hand, remained calm. His face was impassive, his body relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, watching every detail of the target. It was as if he was in a completely different world from everyone else. The crowd began to murmur in disbelief at how effortlessly he seemed to be outperforming James. James gritted his teeth. "He can't win this," he thought. "I'll show him." He took a deep breath and prepared for his next shot. He focused, or at least tried to. The weight of his failure bore down on him as he aimed for the target. His muscles were tense, his hands trembling slightly. He couldn't afford another mistake. Bang! The shot hit the target, but it was way off center. Another miss. The crowd was silent. Even James knew it. His confidence was shattered. Jack shot next, taking his time. Bang! Another perfect shot. There was no denying it now. James had lost. As the final round concluded, Jack had beaten James not once, but twice. The crowd erupted in applause, but Jack barely noticed. His heart was still racing, but for a different reason. It wasn't about the victory, it was about proving something to himself. James stood still, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He had been dethroned in front of the people he had once considered his peers. He couldn't even bring himself to look Jack in the eye. Jack walked over to him, extending a hand. "You've got skill." "It's not about the records, though," Jack said quietly. "It's about how you handle the pressure." James glanced at Jack's hand, hesitated, and then took it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Maybe I need to rethink why I do this," James muttered, his voice softer than it had been all day. Jack smiled faintly. That's the first step. After the match, Jack didn't seek fame. The other members of the club came to congratulate him, but he was already gathering his things. He wasn't a man of many words, and he wasn't here to become a legend. He was here for Emma, for the chance to make her proud of her father. That was all that mattered to him. James, on the other hand, began to change. No longer consumed by his need to win at all costs, he started practicing with more purpose, focused on improving himself rather than crushing others. Jack's victory had done more than break a record. It had shown him a new way of approaching the sport, and perhaps life itself. As Jack left the range that day, he looked up at the sky. The weight of his past was still there, but for the first time in a long while, it felt a little lighter. He had proven his worth, not to anyone else, but to himself. And for that, he was at peace. The week after the match, James found himself in a quiet corner of the Bullseye Club, staring at the spot where he had once been untouchable. His hands, still slightly trembling from the intensity of the match, rested on the counter. He hadn't spoken much since the defeat, but the conversations with the other members had been different lately. They weren't discussing his record anymore. Instead, they were asking about Jack, about how a man who had never been in the spotlight could shoot so effortlessly. For the first time, James found himself questioning everything he had ever believed about himself. His whole identity had been tied to his shooting prowess. The fame, the accolades, it was what made him feel valued. But now, after Jack's quiet, almost effortless victory, James realized that he had been chasing the wrong thing all along. "You okay, James?" Dave, the manager, asked, leaning over the counter. His tone was gentle but filled with an understanding that made James feel exposed. "You've been quiet." James lifted his head slowly, looking Dave in the eye. "I don't know anymore, Dave. I don't know why I'm doing this. I was always just the best. But Jack, he came in. And, in a few shots, he broke me." Dave nodded. "It happens. But what did you learn from it?" James's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup. "That it's not about being the best. It's about why you do it. Jack, he shoots because he's at peace with it. Me? I've been shooting for the wrong reasons all this time." Dave smiled faintly. "That's a start." Meanwhile, Jack's life had slowly begun to settle into a new rhythm. After the victory, he didn't change much. His focus remained on Emma, who was flourishing in her studies and developing a love for reading, just like her father. Jack found joy in small, quiet moments with her, helping with homework, attending her school events, and simply watching her grow. Despite the attention he'd received at the Bullseye Club, Jack didn't crave recognition. He didn't need the admiration. His actions spoke for him. That's what mattered to him most, the ability to provide for Emma and give her the stability he never had growing up. But life, as always, had a way of testing Jack. One afternoon, as he walked into the range to practice, he noticed James sitting by the counter, nervously fiddling with his gear. Jack's eyes met James's briefly, but he didn't say anything. He wasn't there to pick fights or lecture anyone. He simply set up his equipment and began to focus on the target. It wasn't long before James approached him, his hands still tense. "Jack, can we talk?" Jack paused and turned to face him, surprised. "Sure. I just wanted to say," James started, "that what you did, it wasn't just about the shooting. It was about how you handled it. You weren't looking to crush anyone. I've spent my whole life chasing records, trying to prove I'm the best. But that doesn't mean anything if you're doing it for the wrong reasons." Jack studied him for a moment, then nodded. "It took you a while to figure that out." James chuckled bitterly. "Yeah, a little. But I get it now. I want to shoot because it makes me feel right. I don't want to chase the wrong thing anymore." Jack gave a small, approving smile. "Then you're on the right path." Although Jack had found peace in his small victories, something began to stir within him. After weeks of practicing at the range, he started to feel an urge, a hunger to test himself once more, not against James or anyone else but against the challenges inside of him. He didn't talk about it to anyone, but it became clear that the moment of glory at the Bullseye Club hadn't fulfilled him entirely. It wasn't enough to just break records. There was something deeper that Jack needed to confront. One evening, as he sat with Emma on the porch, watching the sun set, she turned to him, her face serious. "Are you happy, Daddy?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost cautious. Jack blinked, startled by the question. "Of course, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" "I don't know," Emma said, her brow furrowing. "You always look tired. Not just because of work. It's like you're carrying something that makes you sad sometimes." Jack looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. How could he explain to her the parts of himself that were broken? The parts he never showed? He had spent years building walls around those feelings, pretending they didn't exist. But now, for the first time, it felt like Emma was seeing through them. "I'm trying, Emma," Jack said softly. "I'm just trying to figure out the right way to be happy." Emma smiled, reaching over and holding his hand. "You don't have to figure it out alone." Jack squeezed her hand, his heart swelling with emotion. She was wise beyond her years. And for the first time in a long while, Jack felt the stirrings of hope. He might not have all the answers, but he didn't need to face everything by himself anymore. A few months later, the Bullseye Club was hosting a regional competition. Jack hadn't planned on entering, but a small part of him, a part that had been dormant for years, felt the urge to challenge himself once more. It wasn't about breaking records. It wasn't even about winning. It was about letting go of the fear that had held him back for so long. The fear of being alone. The fear of failure. James, now a much more grounded individual, was preparing for the competition as well. He had worked hard to regain his focus, and his approach to shooting had become more refined. Jack had noticed his transformation, but they hadn't spoken much outside the range. On the day of the competition, both men stood at the line, their rifles aimed at the target. Jack took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling in. This wasn't just another contest, it was his personal test, the one he'd been avoiding for years, the test of his own limits. The first shot rang out, and Jack's heart raced. It wasn't perfect, but that was okay. He steadied himself and took another shot, and then another. Each shot was a step forward, a moment of release. James shot next to him, his movements smooth, controlled. They didn't speak. But for the first time, Jack understood that this wasn't a competition anymore. It was about letting go of the past and finding peace in the present. When the final round ended, neither Jack nor James had broken any records. But they had both won something far more valuable: inner peace. In the weeks that followed, Jack's life settled into a new routine. He continued shooting at the range. But now, it was about enjoying the process, not the outcome. He spent more time with Emma, watching her grow into a confident young girl who was beginning to understand the complexities of life. James continued to improve, not because he needed to prove something to anyone, but because he enjoyed it. He and Jack shared a quiet respect for each other now. A respect born from the understanding that winning wasn't everything. And for Jack, the victory was not in the trophies or the records. It was in the quiet moments, the ones spent with Emma, the ones spent finding himself again. In the end, Jack realized that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought within ourselves. But they are the ones that are most worth winning. Months had passed since the regional competition. Jack had settled into a peaceful rhythm, working at his day job, enjoying the simple moments with Emma, and spending his free time at the range. His life was quieter now, less tumultuous than it had ever been before. But even in this calm, there was still something stirring inside him, a feeling that something was missing. He had returned to the Bullseye Club that afternoon, preparing for another round of practice. He wasn't seeking perfection anymore, just the feeling of focus, the kind that let him escape the noise of the world. But as he walked in, something felt different. The atmosphere in the club had changed, a buzz of excitement in the air. James was already there, practicing with a group of younger shooters, showing them some of his techniques. But there was an unusual tension, a sense of competition that seemed more intense than before. Jack couldn't quite place it at first. But then, as he moved to his usual lane, he overheard a conversation between two members of the club. "They're holding a national competition next month," one of the men said, his voice tinged with excitement. "It's going to be huge. And James has been invited to compete against the best." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't been paying attention to the competition scene lately, but the mention of a national event piqued his interest. It wasn't the competition that caught his attention, though it was the idea that James, who had once been so focused on proving himself, might be feeling the weight of expectation again. Jack couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment for James to prove that he had truly changed, or if the old pressures would resurface. Either way, he knew it wouldn't be easy for him to face. As he set up his rifle, Jack's thoughts drifted to James. Despite everything that had happened, Jack felt a certain responsibility for James' journey after all. It was his quiet victory that had started the process of change for the younger shooter. Maybe this competition was more than just a test of skill. Maybe it was a test of character. The next day, Jack received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was familiar. "Hey, Jack. It's Dave from the Bullseye Club. I've got an invitation for you." Jack paused. "An invitation for me?" "Yeah. You've been shooting here long enough, and after that impressive performance, we think you're ready for something bigger. The national competition is coming up next month, and we've been asked to send our top shooters. I'm extending the offer to you." Jack felt a rush of emotions. He hadn't thought about competing on a national level, not after everything that had happened. But Dave's words lingered in his mind. The top shooters. Was he truly one of them now? More importantly, did he want to be? "I don't know, Dave," Jack said, his voice uncertain. "I'm not in it for the records anymore. I'm happy with where I am." "I get that, Jack. But think of it this way. This isn't about breaking records. It's about testing yourself. About seeing how far you've come. You've already proved that you have what it takes. Now it's just about taking that next step." Jack paused, considering the offer. He could see it. A chance to prove not just to others, but to himself, that he was more than his past, more than the man who had once been broken by his circumstances. "I'll think about it," Jack said finally, his voice filled with quiet resolve. The weeks leading up to the national competition were filled with tension, not just in Jack, but also in James. Although he had become more grounded, the pressure of representing the Bullseye Club at a national level weighed heavily on him. He had always been confident, but now, with the competition so close, he was beginning to doubt whether he had the right mindset. Jack could see it every time he walked into the range. James was pushing himself harder than ever, his movements erratic, his focus slipping as the days went by. He wasn't the calm, collected shooter Jack had seen before. He was no longer shooting with precision, he was shooting with desperation. One evening, as Jack finished his practice, he saw James alone in the corner, staring at his rifle, his hands trembling. "James," Jack called out softly, stepping toward him. "You okay?" James looked up, his eyes full of frustration. "I don't know, man. I've been training non-stop, but I don't feel ready. I'm not the same guy I was when we first met, but I still feel like I'm chasing something. I don't know what it is anymore." Jack stood beside him, his own thoughts swirling. "You don't need to chase anything, James. The only person you have to beat is yourself. The rest titles, records those don't matter. It's about finding your own rhythm, your own peace." James sighed, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. "It's harder than it sounds." Jack placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know, but you're stronger than you think. We all are." For the first time in weeks, James nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thanks, Jack. I needed to hear that." The day before the national competition, Jack sat on his porch, looking out over the horizon. Emma was inside, reading a book, and Jack found himself reflecting on everything that had brought him to this point. The quiet victories, the lessons learned, the redemption. He didn't have to compete. He didn't have to chase the recognition. But this was different. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about confronting the fear inside him. The fear that he wasn't enough. The fear that, despite everything, he could still lose the things that mattered most. Jack stood up, his decision clear. He wasn't going to compete for the glory. He was going to compete for himself, for the peace he had fought so hard to find. The national competition was everything Jack had expected and more. Shooters from all over the country had gathered, each one determined to prove themselves the best. The tension was palpable in the air, as competitors took their places, the sound of rifles echoing throughout the arena. James was there, his face set with determination. Jack could see the old fire in his eyes, but there was something different now. He wasn't the arrogant competitor he had once been. He was focused, calm, and for the first time, he looked like he was competing for the right reasons. When it was Jack's turn to take the line, He felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't the best shooter here, nor did he need to be. He wasn't competing to break records, he was competing to see how far he had come, to face the challenges within himself. Jack took a deep breath, aimed, and shot. The crowd was silent as the target split open, a perfect bullseye. But Jack wasn't paying attention to the applause. He was focused on the feeling of quiet strength, knowing that, win or lose, he had already achieved everything that mattered. When the competition ended, Jack didn't walk away with a trophy or a medal, but what he had gained was far more valuable: a sense of peace, a connection to his own strength, and the realization that the greatest victories are the ones fought within. James finished just behind him, his performance strong but not quite enough to claim the top spot. Yet, as the two of them stood side by side, exchanging a quiet nod of respect, they both knew that the competition had been about something far more profound than trophies. Jack looked at James, smiling. "We did it." James grinned back, his face lighter than it had been in years. "Yeah, we did." As they walked off the range together, Jack felt a sense of completeness, knowing that sometimes the true victory is not in winning but in learning to let go and embrace who you are. The drive back from the national competition was quieter than Jack had expected. He and James had shared a ride, the air between them comfortable yet thoughtful. They didn't need to say much, both had learned so much in the past few weeks, and now it was time to let the lessons sink in. Jack glanced at James, who was staring out the window, his expression distant. "You did well, James," Jack said, breaking the silence. James turned to him, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah. But it wasn't just about shooting, was it?" He looked out the window again. "I think I was trying to outrun something, trying to beat my past, my failures. But what I really needed to do was learn how to make peace with them." Jack nodded, his eyes on the road. "That's it. It's not about outrunning your past. It's about accepting it and moving forward. Not because you have to, but because you want to." James turned to him then, eyes wide with newfound understanding. "And you're okay with everything? With your past? You don't have regrets?" Jack thought for a moment. "I have regrets, sure, but I'm not defined by them anymore. I've learned to live with them, to be better because of them." He glanced at James. "And you're learning too. It's not about being perfect, it's about being whole." James smiled, the weight of the conversation easing his mind. "I think I'm getting it. Thanks, Jack. For everything." Jack smiled back, his heart light for the first time in a long while. "You're welcome, James. You're not alone in this anymore." When Jack arrived home, Emma was waiting for him, sitting at the porch steps, her book in her lap. She looked up when she heard his car pull up, her face lighting up with a smile. "Daddy," she called out, running over to him as he stepped out of the car. Jack knelt down, opening his arms to her. "Hey, sweetheart. I missed you." Emma hugged him tightly. "I missed you too. How did the competition go?" Jack stood up with her in his arms, walking back to the porch. "I didn't win, but I learned a lot. More than I expected." Emma looked at him curiously. "You didn't win? But you always win." Jack chuckled softly, his heart swelling with love for his daughter. "Not every win is about trophies, Em. Sometimes, the biggest wins happen inside." He set her down gently on the porch and sat next to her. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the world around them. Jack felt a deep sense of peace settle in his chest as he looked at his daughter, his reason for everything. Emma leaned against him, and Jack wrapped his arm around her. "Do you think you'll ever compete again?" she asked softly. Jack smiled down at her. "Maybe. But if I do, it won't be about breaking records. It'll be about knowing that I'm doing something I love, for the right reasons." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I think that's a good reason." James, too, had returned home with a sense of quiet relief. The pressure that had weighed him down for so long had lifted, and although he hadn't taken first place, he had earned something far more valuable: self-acceptance. Over the next few weeks, James began to shift his focus. He still trained at the Bullseye Club, but his goals had changed. No longer obsessed with breaking records or proving himself, he now shot for the love of the sport, the discipline it brought him, and the mental clarity it provided. He also started mentoring younger shooters at the club, teaching them not just about technique, but about the importance of balance: how to shoot with precision, but also how to shoot with purpose. He found joy in helping others grow, and slowly, he came to realize that this was where his true strength lay, not in being the best, but in sharing what he had learned. One afternoon, as James was finishing up a practice session, Dave approached him. "James," he said, "I've been meaning to talk to you." James paused, lowering his rifle. "Yeah?" Dave smiled. "You've really come a long way, my friend. I see a new fire in you. Not the kind that burns with competition, but the kind that burns with passion for the sport. I think you're ready for something more. How would you feel about becoming a coach here at the club?" James looked at him, surprised. "A coach? Yeah. You've got the skills, the experience, and now you've got the right mindset. You've got a lot to offer. I think you'd make a great coach for the next generation of shooters." James stood there for a moment, his mind racing. This wasn't what he had expected, but it felt right. He had spent so long chasing after the wrong things. But this was something he could give back. "I think I'd like that," he said finally, his voice full of conviction. "I'd like that a lot." In the months that followed, both Jack and James continued their journeys, but their paths had taken on new meaning. Jack, though no longer competing for titles, found peace in his practice and his connection with Emma. He spent more time focused on his family, making sure that he was present for every important moment in Emma's life. James, now a coach at the Bullseye Club, found a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. He wasn't just teaching shooting techniques, he was teaching life skills, patience, and the value of perseverance. Watching his students grow gave him a sense of purpose he had never imagined. Both men had learned the same lesson in different ways. That true victory isn't found in records or recognition, but in the quiet moments of personal growth, in learning to live with yourself, and in helping others to do the same. As the years passed, the Bullseye Club became known not just for its competitive spirit, but for the sense of community and mentorship that had been cultivated by James and Jack. Their journeys, though different, had intersected in a way that changed both of their lives and the lives of everyone around them. One evening, as Jack sat with Emma watching the sunset, he thought back to the day when everything had changed, the day he had stepped onto that shooting line. Unsure of what he was seeking, but knowing that he needed to take that first step, he smiled softly. "You know, Em, I think we've found something more valuable than any trophy." Emma looked up at him, her face lit by the soft glow of the fading Sunday. "What's that, Daddy?" "Peace," Jack said, his heart full. "And it's the one thing that no one can ever take from you." Years passed, and life had found its balance. Jack and Emma had built a beautiful life together, one grounded in love, patience, and understanding. The days of Jack's struggles seemed like a distant memory, a chapter he could look back on with gratitude for the lessons they had taught him. He had finally made peace with his past, and with every passing day, he found new ways to cherish the present. Jack still spent his afternoons at the Bullseye Club, but now, his role had shifted. He wasn't there to break records or to prove anything. He was there to mentor, to pass on the lessons he had learned to others who, like him once, needed guidance. The young shooters at the club looked up to him, not just for his skill, but for his quiet strength and wisdom. He had become a symbol of what it meant to overcome adversity and find peace in a world that often felt like it was constantly moving too fast. One day, as Jack sat on the porch with Emma, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he realized just how much had changed. Emma was no longer the little girl who had waited for him to return from his competitions. She was now a teenager, full of dreams, with a clear vision of who she wanted to be. She had grown into someone Jack could be proud of, someone who embodied the quiet strength he had always tried to show her. "Dad," Emma said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I've been thinking a lot lately, about everything. And I wanted to thank you for always being there, for teaching me how to find peace in everything." Jack smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You've always known how to find it, Em. It's in you. Just like it was in me. I just helped you see it." Emma looked at him, her eyes full of understanding. "I know, and I want to be like you. I want to make a difference, to help others the way you've helped me." Jack's heart swelled. She was ready, and he knew that she would go on to do incredible things in the world. He had given her the foundation of love and peace, and now she would build on that foundation in her own way. As the years went by, the Bullseye Club continued to thrive under the guidance of James, who had become a mentor to a new generation of shooters. James and Jack, once competitors, had now become partners in teaching, each bringing their own unique strengths to the table. They had become a team, their bond forged not through rivalry, but through mutual respect and understanding. Jack had come to realize that the true measure of success wasn't in the accolades or trophies, but in the lives you touched along the way. His journey had come full circle. He had found peace, not in winning, but in living authentically, in sharing his story, and in helping others to do the same. As the sun set that evening, Jack looked at Emma one last time. "You've already won, sweetheart," he said softly. "You've found your peace, and that's all that matters." With that, he leaned back in his chair, content. The world had changed, but Jack knew that the most important thing was that he had finally found his place in it, and that place was exactly where he needed to be, at peace, with those he loved and with himself.